Okay, well, welcome everybody to Solar Noon Tuesday. I'm Jay Warmke with solarpvtraining.com. And if you're new to this session, what we do is every week at noon on Tuesdays, we talk about solar activity, and the structure of this presentation is basically threefold. We first recap all of the news of the week in the solar world, and then I'll try and highlight any upcoming webinars, any events that may be of interest to those geeks of us amongst us who are so interested in solar. And then we try and highlight a item of interest within the solar community. And so that is the structure of this. So let's go ahead and jump into the solar news for this week. Well, first off, EPRI, a nonprofit electricity research and development organization, announced a collaboration with Microsoft to develop and deploy AI solutions for the energy sector. The Open Power AI Consortium, which is what it's called, will collaborate with energy companies globally in an effort to enhance grid reliability, improve workforce safety, advance forecasting and planning models, as well as achieve real-time grid intelligence, all using artificial intelligence. This was announced, they announced the launch of this Open Power AI Consortium at NVIDIA's GTC conference last month. They stated, this sounds a bit PR, that it's an effort, they hope to drive the development and deployment of open AI models tailored to the power sector, accelerating the AI adoption and reducing operating costs within the power sector. So it's basically open AI for power. The consortium will focus on three primary areas: develop and maintain open source AI models, data sets, libraries optimized to address power specific issues or challenges, create an environment to develop AI applications and collaborations with startups, with academia, universities, colleges, national labs, utilities, and other tech companies, and then accelerate the innovation and reduce the risk of deploying these AI models across that sector. Right. Last Wednesday, this is one of these things where I always say the natural gas empire strikes back. But last Wednesday, the Texas Senate passed Senate Bill 388, which sets a target of 50% of all new power plant capacities within that state must be, and here's their nice little quote, it says, sourced from dispatchable generation other than battery energy storage, which is basically code for natural gas. An earlier version of the bill actually mandated that all of these generators had to be natural gas. They softened that wording a bit. This new wording actually could theoretically include coal and nuclear as part of that, but nobody really anticipates there being any new coal or nuclear power plants built in Texas. So it really is just to promote natural gas as a generating source of electricity. Power plant owners and utilities who don't invest their money in natural gas will have to comply with by paying buying credits and paying these fees to the government, raising the cost of generating power from any source other than natural gas. Now, if this Senate bill is passed by the House and then signed into law by Governor Greg Abbott, the bill will effectively penalize renewable energies and reward utilities that are using natural gas. And part of the reason for this is even though natural gas remains the largest source of electricity generation nationwide, it has slipped to just 7% of the new generating capacity expected to come online in 2025, according to the Energy Information Administration, or EIA. Solar, batteries, wind, and the others other renewables will deliver 93% of new generating capacity. And in Texas, this transition away from natural gas towards renewable is even more dramatic. Over the last 4 years, 95% of all new electric generation has come from wind, solar, and batteries, while only 5% of new generation sources are natural gas. So clearly, what they're trying to do legislatively is what they couldn't do competitively, which is to take that 5% and try and push that into 50%. An Indiana bill has defined natural gas and propane as clean energy sources, and that bill is awaiting the governor's signature in Indiana. The House passed Senate Bill 178 last Monday. The author of the bill said that it's intended to allow Indiana to use federal clean energy grants to fund natural gas and propane projects. Ohio passed similar legislation in 2022 in an attempt to help companies comply with ESG standards. And ESG stands for environmental, social, and governance. These are basically policies that have to consider environmental and social impacts when you're developing various energy investments. Renewable energy capacity around the world surged last year, according to a new report from the International Renewable Energy Agency, or IRENA, particularly in the United States and China. The data shows that renewables such as wind, solar, and battery power sources are growing at a far faster rates than traditional power sources of coal and natural gas. In 2012, renewable energy surpassed fossil fuel as the major source of energy globally. And since that date, renewables have continued to expand their capacity pretty dramatically, while fossil fuel sources have either remained pretty flat or actually diminished, which in the case of coal, diminished quite dramatically. Solar and wind energy dominated the expansion rate last year, solar increasing a little bit over 32% and wind a little bit over 11% worldwide. There are significant geographical differences remaining in the trajectory towards renewable energy. About 64% of the global additional capacity took place in China. China alone added 278 gigawatts of renewable power last year. India added about 24.5 gigawatts. Solar energy increased dramatically in the US in 2024. We saw an additional 38.3 gigawatts in solar, which was a 54% increase over what was installed in 2023. And Energy Abundance Development Corporation has unveiled what they're calling Data City, Texas. This is a 5 gigawatt behind the meter data center hub that's going to be built on 50,000 acres near Laredo, Texas. And it's going to be 100% green energy operating 24/7. Data City will be built in phases. The first phase of 300 megawatts will be, and 1 million square feet of data center will be launched in 2026, then expanded quickly to 5 gigawatts with over 15 million square feet of leasable space that they anticipate as the move towards data centers and artificial intelligence accelerates. The project is designed to host large AI workloads. These things use power-dense racking systems with centralized cooling systems that directly cool all of these AI chips that are housed in there. Fully islanded from ERCOT, and I think this is the important part of it. I mean, we're seeing data centers built all the time, but the islanding aspect, which is basically they're going to be combining wind, solar, batteries, and even hydrogen turbines located behind the meter. So essentially, they're creating their own small grid, microgrid, but in this case, a fairly large microgrid, so that the data center owns and operates its own, essentially its own utility. That way, the project avoids all of the interconnection costs and all the interconnection delays that can add as much as 5 years to a project of this nature. I think we're going to be seeing a lot more of this happening where these large companies just decide we're going to bypass the regulatory system altogether. We're going to build our own little utility here behind the meter where we can control its operation and its timeline. And that's the news from the solar industry for this week. Does anyone who's online have any comments on what we've talked about here so far? Before we jump into the events of the week, give me just a second. All right, everybody's always so quiet. All right, so let's go ahead and get into the announcements for the week. There's on April 2nd, we have basically maximizing energy storage performance and returns. That's at 2 p.m. That'll be tomorrow. What do you know? It's actually April Fool's Day. On April 3rd, there's a webinar on homeowners trends from Solar Power World at 2 p.m. Then on April 3rd at 3:30 in the afternoon, all of these times are Eastern time, by the way. There's one about recapping the first 100 days of the Trump administration from an energy perspective. I think they've got a bunch of lobbyists and people on there. Then April 9th, battery powered homes. This is by a fellow who wrote a book called The Battery Powered Home, which is apparently a New York Times bestseller. 1 p.m., April 9th. That's through Renvu. And then if Trump wasn't enough there in the first 100 days, we get to find out what's going to happen after the first 100 days. So April 30th, there's one at noon, Beyond the First 100 Days, the sequel. All right. Then we've got May 19th through the 22nd, Clean Power. This is a face-to-face conference in Phoenix, Arizona, if you're so inclined. And then we also have all of our online and in-person sessions, trainings for solar at solarpvtraining.com. And that is all of the events that came by my desk. Anybody else have anything they want to add into that list as we move forward? Okay, so hearing none, this sounds like one of my board meetings. We'll go ahead and jump in, excuse me, to do a little bit of an electric vehicle update. And I do hope we can get some discussion going on this. This is something, we've talked about electric vehicles before, and I just thought this would be a good opportunity to get up to speed because this is an industry that's evolving very quickly. I also want to remind everybody that these sessions are sponsored here by ETA, Electronic Technicians Association, and all of these sessions actually qualify for a half hour of continuing education credit, which is part of the requirement for their solar certification program. You can access those and get your certificate of completion at solarpvtraining.com. All right, so that's all of the advertisements out of the way. There we go. All right, so let's look a little bit. I wanted to kind of take just a few minutes here to recap what's been going on in the EV marketplace. And by EVs, I also tend to include plug-in hybrids. I think that's going to, in the short term, be a dominant technology and then slowly evolve into electric vehicles. It wasn't really part of my formal presentation, but if I go back just a couple of years, one of the criticisms, or many of the criticisms around EVs, those people who are very EV skeptical, the things that they were talking about were range anxiety. These things cannot go very far on a charge. That is a concern. How long does it take to recharge these vehicles? That's a concern. Cost of these vehicles, that's a concern. So those were the concerns that if you were skeptical about electric vehicles, legitimately you would say, okay, I don't think they're going to be replacing internal combustion engines. These things are just so difficult to overcome. Well, as a bit of a spoiler, I'll tell you that most of those issues have been overcome already. So the fact that in the US they're talking about removing some of the incentives, the $7,500 incentive that's out there for the purchase, it's a tax credit for purchasing an electric vehicle. Personally, I don't think that's going to have much of an impact. If you were to draw a diagram, it would probably be, as they always, up and to the right. You may see a little bit of a blip because the incentive to purchase an electric vehicle has declined slightly because that credit goes away. But then it's going to just be it's going to be recovered quickly in the next couple of years, just because prices come down. All right, so let's look at the growth here historically of these vehicles, what we've seen over the past 10 years or so. And you can see that the growth year on year has been pretty dramatic. Some years 40, 50, 60% growth year on year. But the part of this diagram I found interesting is when you look at that red line up above the bar graphs of the growth, this is the percentage that EV share is of vehicles in total that are being sold. So back in 2015, you're looking at less than 1%, about 0.5% of all of the vehicles are going to be either plug-in hybrids or battery electric vehicles. And by 2024, you're really looking, we're pushing 20% of all vehicles sold worldwide are now electric vehicles or plug-in hybrid vehicles. So that is a significant growth of market share within a very, very short period of time. So I think that to me was the significant takeaway, even more so than seeing 30, 20, 30, 40% growth year on year, because you're starting at a pretty small number. And so those percentages are a little bit skewed. But when you start looking at percentage overall of vehicles that are sold worldwide, it becomes significant. The growth is definitely geographically unequal. About 60% of all of the electric vehicles that are being sold worldwide are sold in China. So once again, in this industry, in this evolution towards green technology, it's going to be dominated by China. And you can just see there that EV growth, 31% in China year on year. So we're talking, 2023 to 2024. And then we see that North America, about a 12% growth. Europe, and this was the number that kind of sticks out, European growth for electric vehicles really, really flat. Well, why was European growth stagnating? And there were pretty much just a couple of reasons. One was that during the pandemic, basically 2020, 2021, European governments, they instituted some pretty strong green mandates as far as vehicle emissions. This spurred a rapid movement into electric vehicles. In fact, you saw 136% there one year, 68% the next year, increases. It actually created a backlog of demand. You could not get enough electric vehicles into Europe to meet that demand. And when you have that situation, prices start going up. So the prices started going up. The demand was lessened because of these increased prices. And then by 2024, a lot of the countries that had instituted these incentives, similar to the incentives that we have here in the US of, $7,500 per vehicle, well, those incentives were being phased out. So countries such as Germany, Norway, Sweden, the UK, Italy, though they were phasing out these incentives. So in combination, you basically had super high demand early on, large incentives, governmental incentives through their green programs, and then prices increased, subsidies decreased, and the demand flattened. I think if we go on year to year to year from here, you're going to see that curve up and to the right start to level out a little bit. So those were the main reasons why Europe is stagnating a bit. Okay, so where are the sales here? Who are the winners? Who are the losers when it comes to electric vehicles? Well, those of us who follow this kind of thing, it'd probably be no surprise. BYD is top of the pack when it comes to the electric vehicles. And actually in doing the research for this, I found it interesting. I always wondered what BYD, I assumed it was just but anyway, it's supposed to stand for Build Your Dreams, which was, I don't know if they made that up after the fact. It sounds cute, but anyway, build your dreams. So I can't imagine a Chinese company built their name around an English phrase. That's, I guess, what I'm getting at. Okay, Tesla. If you just look at those top two, BYD surging 26% this year, first half, Tesla falling 7%. Part of what prompted this in my own mind to look at is just all the news reports I've been hearing about this precipitous fall off of Tesla. There's a lot of reasons. A lot of it is his activity on the political sphere is ticking off a lot of people. So there other nations are Germany. I know I heard, if I recall right, it's like a 50% drop off in sales of Teslas. So he's kind of causing his own problems there. So Tesla has been the leader for many years. I've got a slide that demonstrates that. Now they're the only one of these really that's falling off. There's another one there, Stellantis, had a little bit of a fall off, but Tesla is in decline for sure. BYD at the moment is in ascendancy. Third place, VW, Volkswagen. Geely is another Chinese company. So we're really seeing a move towards domination of Chinese manufacturers in this marketplace. Okay, so if we compare this with just 4 years ago, this is what it looked like in the world of EVs. Tesla, number one, far and away, growing at 87%. Compare that with -7% right now. VW, second place, 80% growth. Now we're looking BYD starting to ascend up through the ranks, growing very rapidly. So, but if you really look at those top 10, only a couple, I think, let's see, just BYD was about the only Chinese company there. All the other ones, you've got some Korean, a lot of German, Volkswagen, BMW. So anyway, just interesting when you compare that graph with this graph, just to see how the ascendancy of the Chinese automakers are really shooting up through the roof. And I'll be curious to see if we don't see Indian manufacturers or Brazilian manufacturers. I think that the barriers to entry into this marketplace are a lot less than in the internal combustion engine. So we may begin to see some of this. I know some of the surprising the automotive industry is not the fact that the Chinese manufacturers are growing so quickly, but that their product is really good. That's what's really surprising a lot of folks. I've heard a lot, looking at the videos, a lot of comparisons between Tesla and BYD, where the people who are at least reporting it are saying their experience with the BYD, it feels like a better car. I don't know. I've been in a Tesla. I've never been in a BYD, so I don't have personal experience on that. Just this graph I just thought was interesting. I pulled it up just to show you where are these companies headquartered. In this world we live in, there's no such thing really as an American car or a German car. There's a lot of different, the borders are disappearing. I suspect, at least at the moment, there is such a thing as a Chinese car. I think most of that is held pretty close to the chest. Hopefully that will change over time. But Chinese, all of these in red are Chinese-based vehicle manufacturers. So really, we've got China dominating. There's Tesla there in number 2 position. And then there are a couple of the green ones, the German, BMW, Volkswagen, Mercedes, Audi. Those are obviously some of the higher end electric vehicles. And then, of course, Volvo from Sweden, and then Korea and Japan. When you look at just a comparison between Tesla and BYD, this is what the graph is looking at. Like, really, it's only been a couple of years since BYD shot past Tesla. And now they're really in a position where they're generating about 3 times as many units as Tesla is worldwide. So let's take a look at a couple of the models. Well, I'll pause here. Does anyone have a comment? I know I'm being harsh on Tesla and kind of pushing BYD. I guess I kind of mean to, but uh, mostly because I'm annoyed with Tesla. Well, the owner. So, Gary,
Yeah, a lot of the most recent downfall or down sales in Tesla is because they're redoing the Model Y. And so they've sold out all of their older Model Ys over the last several months, and they've just now started shipping the new Model Y. So there's been a big flat line on their sales for 4 months trying to redo the Model Y.
okay. Well, that's fair. And I mean, one of the criticism of Tesla over the years has been they make announcements and then those they make announcements that things are just around the corner and the corner seems to be ever receding. You know, the famous auto drive or self-driving vehicle. I mean, he's made those announcements every 6 months for the last 4 years of saying, you know, it's about to happen, it's about to happen, it's about to happen. And I always say that same thing like with hydrogen as a fuel. I say it's the technology of the future and always will be. You know, it's always just a couple of years off and it always will be. So, yeah, I get into a little bit about self-driving cars here in a minute, but the Tesla Model 3 is their low-end vehicle. I guess their Tesla Model Y, is that supposed to be a low-end vehicle?
It's your basic family car,
Okay. So I don't know if it's the bottom of the line or maybe one step up.
one step up.
Yeah. Okay, well, their low price vehicle, the Model 3, ranges from 44,130 bucks to 56,630 dollars. Has a 50 kilowatt hour battery, a range of around 300 miles. Now, again, with these electric vehicles, I would take these ranges with a grain of salt. There's a lot of variables that go into that, city versus highway, but the temperature is a big issue. You know, colder temperatures, it's going to go less far. Warmer temperatures, it's going to go farther. And I saw a really interesting video online where some guy in England, he took a bunch of electric vehicles, you know, all the different ones, and had drivers. They all started at the same place. They drove and they drove the vehicles until they ran out of juice, till they basically came to a stop. And he was just seeing how far these vehicles would go compared to how far they said they were going to go. And the best he got was 90%. Some of them were only getting 60% of what they claim they got as range. So again, take it with a grain of salt. Maybe use it as comparison against others. But if it says it has a range of 300 miles, maybe it does, maybe it doesn't. So you'll have to bear that in mind. Now, one of
Hey,
the yep,
yeah,
somebody else.
David, on here, I think one thing we have to bear in mind is that when it comes to the electric vehicle market, BYD, a lot of the Chinese companies, they don't just sell electric cars, they enter transit bus and everything like that as well. I don't think Tesla enters that particular market. So you will find when there's projects, tenders, and even transportation companies looking to buy electric vehicles on a large scale, like electric buses, they may quicker look at the BYD and some of the Chinese manufacturers who obviously have that product line.
Yeah. Yeah, that's fair point. And I did see that BYD is actually selling buses here in the United States. They do have that capacity. They're not selling cars, light vehicles. This particular session, I'm just kind of focusing on light vehicles. So, but BYD, of course, is a large manufacturer of battery systems worldwide. A lot of stationary batteries we use in solar, for example. Tesla's in that market as well. But you know, these things are basically batteries that you drive anyway. So, but I just wanted to make the comparison here between the Tesla Model 3, which is 45,000, 55,000. That's pretty pricey. You know, at least my idea of buying a car, it's pretty pricey. Compare that with BYD. The BYD Seagull, obviously a little bit less range, a little smaller battery, but it's 9,700 bucks. So you're getting an electric vehicle, a good, nice electric vehicle for under 10 grand. No wonder the American automobile industry is worried about these companies, this company in particular, coming into this marketplace. So the United States has responded by putting 100% tariff on any imported electric vehicle. Well, 100% tariff, I'll pay 18,000 bucks. I don't know, I mean, compared to 50,000 for a Tesla. So maybe that's not the incentive or the disincentive that they think it is. I mean, maybe these guys will begin to infiltrate. My guess from a corporate standpoint, BYD is going to say, okay, we've got lots of places we can expand. Let's take the low-hanging fruit first and not worry about these countries like America or Canada that have put in these 100% tariffs. We'll deal with them last. But there's nothing to prevent somebody in India, somebody in Brazil, becoming the next BYD. So this is the market that we're dealing with. And of course you could counter and say, okay, the only reason they're able to manufacture these things so inexpensively is low labor, slave-like conditions, things of that nature. And I'm sure some of that may be true, but in the reading that I did preparing for this, most of this stuff is automated. Most of this stuff, a lot of the reason why BYD has been successful has been a lot of technological innovations. Surely they also get government financing, sweetheart deals from the government, subsidies, things of that nature. Sort of like Tesla did, I mean, all these corporations get these kind of government sweetheart deals when they're starting out. I don't want to say that there is not unfair trade practices going on here, but the reality is the difference between 9,700 bucks for a car and $55,000 for a car, I don't see Tesla competing. Not on a global scale. Not when you're starting to introduce vehicles already into China. Eventually, I mean, not too far away, it's going to be all through Africa, all through these developing countries that have not seen an automobile culture, and now they're going to see it because you've got good, reliable, inexpensive vehicles that are going to be out there. Now, another thing that was interesting as I was doing some of the research was resale of these vehicles. And that's problematic because I think as these price pressures are being put on companies like Tesla, from companies like BYD, they're starting to say, okay, we're going to have to reduce our margins. We're going to have to reduce our prices. The good example, there was a really interesting video of a guy who bought a Cybertruck, one of those weird vehicles that, and they were originally selling for about $100,000 for that Cybertruck. Well, because of the scarcity, because they were not able to get them, people were on waiting lists, they were actually selling for significantly higher than $100,000, like 120, 130,000 bucks. And when you purchased them from Tesla, apparently you had to sign an agreement that you would not resell your vehicle for at least a year. I'm not quite sure why that was all there, but anyway, so the used market on it was non-existent for a period of time. But then some people decided to violate that and sell them anyway. Tesla threatened to sue them, but never did. And anyway, they were able to get pretty high prices. But then they made the announcement that the next edition was coming out. It was going to be improved, but it was going to be 80,000 bucks. So your $100,000 vehicle immediately lost $20,000 of value. Because the next generation, the brand new one, were coming out at 80. Well, if they come out at 60, every person who buys a vehicle, their vehicle is automatically depreciated by whatever the cost is of the new one coming out. So these price pressures are killing the used market place for used high-end electric vehicles. Just thought that was curious. I haven't
Killing.
seen that. Yep.
Well,
Tim?
what do you mean
Interject there?
killing?
Can
What
I
do you mean
interject?
killing?
Oh, well, they can't, they simply, if you paid $100,000 for your vehicle and then you turn around and want to sell it, well, you're not going to get anywhere close to what you paid. You're going to lose $20,000 in resale potential as soon as Tesla's new vehicle drops their price by 20,000. So, I think we're used to as soon as you drive off the lot, your vehicle depreciates significantly.
It,
But what they were looking at is vehicles that they paid $100,000 for had 9,000 miles on them and could only get 50,000, on the used market. So,
there's a flip
So
side
that's
to that,
that's
Jay.
yeah, go ahead, Gary.
That is that for the first buyer, it's terrible. For me as a used buyer, it's great.
great.
Yeah, yeah, for sure, for sure. And I'm sure Tesla doesn't care because they're not part of the used market area. But and there were some other things that were interesting on that. Somebody mentioning about the Cybertruck's panels falling off, and if you watch that video, and I'm sure there are other videos out there that you can watch. There were some weird things with that Cybertruck. Apparently, they tried because they wanted these crisp lines on it. They made the corners of it so jagged that homeowners were like getting, or owners were getting lacerations, when they'd open the door, the door would cut them. The corner of the vehicle would cut them if you brushed against it. People losing fingers in the door, and it just seemed weird. I mean, the whole thing was weird.
That's
Um,
why they were banned in the UK
were they banned in the UK?
for
Yeah.
that reason, for safety reasons.
Okay, I thought it was just aesthetics. So they're culturally, aesthetically a little ahead of us. So, all right, so let's yeah, they're not sold in Canada at the moment or in America. The BYDs are not because of the 100% tariff. They are available in Mexico, so we can make a run down to Mexico and load up load up the car. They can confiscate what we loaded up because we're really just trying to get the car into the country. So it's like, all right. Another thing is BYD is
So
partnering with Uber. Somebody have a comment? I heard something.
yeah, I do.
Yeah.
So then the biggest market for BYDs is the U.S. Wouldn't you say?
No,
Other
well,
than China,
yeah, currently
other
the
than
biggest
China, but
market is China.
it's China, right? But I mean that we are a big market. So if they ever start selling here, then it's it could dominate the world market in a way.
I think well, already they've got their sights set on Europe. So I think what BYD is looking at from a corporate expansion plan, okay, let's deal with Asia. They've already sort of captured the Asian market as the dominant player. Now we're going to expand into Europe, looking at that. They're doing it through partnerships with Uber. They're looking at Latin America as a huge expansion location. I have to assume they're looking at Africa, as potential marketplace. Canada, Australia, those would be relatively small markets comparatively. The U.S., yeah, but I think we tend to be very U.S. centric. As a consumer of automobiles, we've already got quite a lot of them. So maybe you go to the places that don't have, where there is not that much competition. But U.S. is definitely a prize for sure, and Canada. But I suspect we'll be late. We'll be late to the game. So, eh. But I thought that the partnership with Uber was interesting. That's oftentimes people's first introduction to certain vehicles. You can sort of get a sense of a vehicle without buying one, by riding in an Uber. Someday here in southeastern Ohio, we'll actually have Ubers. What do you know? So, speaking of coming late to the game. So what are some of the new EV features that are out there? We sort of touched on the fact that Tesla's in descendancy, the Chinese manufacturers in ascendancy. So what are some of these things that they're all touting at the moment? Well, 800-volt architecture seemed to be one of the big things. Apparently, they've been dealing in the world of 400-volt architecture, and that has a lot to do with how quickly these vehicles are going to charge. So when you're dealing with 800 volt architecture, it'll basically charge twice as fast. At least that's what it appears to be. More powerful, as high as 884 horsepower on some of these models. Certainly the high end models. That's a beast. I mean, if you've ever driven in an electric vehicle or ridden in one, you'll know the acceleration is dramatic. There's a lot of power in these. One reason why forklifts and other vehicles like that are moving or have moved to electric. Hands-free driving, the assisted driving, that's sort of one step removed from driverless. And some of the gas-powered engine vehicles are moving a little bit towards that, where they sense the lanes. You can, in theory, take your hands off and it's going to drive you down the road. Why you'd want to do that, I don't know. But anyway, that's part of what's being touted as standard, even in some of these low-end models. All-wheel drive, that's another feature that's, again, coming to these vehicles. So that gives them a lot better traction, a lot better even off-road ability. Range anxiety. Now, range anxiety was always the big thing. Well, the average now of a EV is about 300 miles. They range anywhere from 141 miles to 512 miles, according to the ones I saw, but an average of around 300-mile range. Well, that's probably, I mean, the average, that's as good or better than a lot of gas vehicles. You know, if you've got a 20-gallon tank and you're getting, you know, low mileage pickup truck type thing, you're not going to get much over 300 miles. A lot more interior luxury. They're supposed to be nice, and that's what I heard a lot about with the BYD zips. And then we talk about the charge. How long does it take to charge your vehicle? And this is something that is, this was an announcement just made by BYD. The Tesla supercharger has been sort of the industry standard where you can use as much as 500 kilowatt charging that allows a car to get 200 miles of range in 15-minute charge. So the way these batteries operate, the way lithium-ion batteries operate in their charging cycle, you can charge to 80% capacity pretty quickly. Then that last 20% takes a long time. So in these instances, you're talking about in 15 minutes, getting to 80% state of charge. Now, it may take you another 10 hours to get that last 20%. That's fine if you're plugging in the vehicle overnight. But if you're on the road, stopping at a gas station somewhere, and you've got a fast charger like that, 15 minutes, that's not unbearable. The BYD just announced their Super E platform, which is basically double what the Tesla platform was. And they're saying they'll give you about 250-mile range in about 5 minutes. So if you're talking about vehicles that, if your big objection to electric vehicle was it doesn't have enough range between charges, well, now the average is around 300 miles. If you're saying it takes too long to recharge them so that it's ineffective for a road trip, I don't want to have to sit on the side of the road for 2 hours while my vehicle's charging. Now you're talking about 250 miles in 5 minutes. So those two things feel to me to have been effectively addressed. What has not yet been addressed is how many of these charging stations are out there. You know, you can go out there and fill up your gas tank almost anywhere. Where are you going to find these things? You know, I mean, that's the next stage. Tesla had announced a very aggressive charging station plan, putting these things all over the place, and then they just kind of threw their hands up and abandoned it. So I'm not quite sure when or how this infrastructure is going to be put in place. The issue that we run into, if you run your local area gas station, and you decide, okay, I'm going to put in a charging station pump, and I'm just going to stick one of them over there. Well, the way that our power bills are handled, the demand charge on your business just shot through the roof. If somebody comes up and plugs in for just one time during the month, let's say it gets used one time during the month, it might double or triple your electric bill just because of the demand charges. So, so that's a concern. I've seen the way that they're addressing it is I have looked or seen several AEP webinars talking about they're coming up with its own tariff for EV chargers. You know, it's going to be under a whole different pricing scheme, which I'm assuming is dealing with that demand charge issue. But I would imagine most of the solutions are going to be that if you put in an EV charging station, it's going to be under its own meter. You know, it's not going to be co-located with your current electrical system. It has to be under its own meter, just so that the demand charge sequence of that doesn't affect your other bill. So that's my guess. That's I got nothing to base it on other than just this vague notion from reading about these other webinars. Does anybody have any feedback on the charging issue? I saw some comments floating through. I couldn't quite read them as they were floating through the chat, but give you just an answer. All right.
Yes. Probably they're going to be bi-directional.
Oh, okay. We'll jump on that. Craig, you had something?
Did you have any statistics for the plug-in hybrid versions? I'm seeing some advertisements for 600 miles on some of these plug-ins, hybrid versions. I think it was for the Toyota RAV4 Prime.
Oh, okay. Yeah, how far they get? Yeah, it's a little sketchier because now I personally own a plug-in hybrid, a Toyota Prius plug-in hybrid. And one of the interesting things, its battery is pretty minimal. You only get about the first 35 miles fully electric, but because of that battery and the hybrid nature of the system, with regenerative braking and the battery and the gas sort of switching off as battery power is available, I get on average about 75 miles to the gallon, even once the battery is drained. Because every time you hit the brakes, it gets a little bit more power or a little more energy in there. So it subsidizes the gasoline. So yeah, I could see our gas tank is only 10 gallons, but we definitely get somewhere in the neighborhood of 700 miles to the gas tank.
Excellent.
So it's a great thing in the rural environment because there are no, commercial charging stations that are convenient. I have a charging station at home. I have a charging station at work, and that's where most people do their charging anyway. But if I were to take a long road trip, it's nice to know that you've got the backup of a gasoline engine.
Exactly.
Yep.
Jay, question with these fast chargers that they're developing, especially the ones seeing mark 1,000 kilowatts. Those would be vehicles compatible with those chargers, meaning come from the same manufacturers. Because I don't want to see with charging EVs, especially with thermal runaways when you overcharge your vehicles. I'm just wondering how they would deal with the different vehicle manufacturers in terms of when they implement these high charging solutions. If it's safe to do so, if you understand what I'm saying.
Yeah. Okay. So if I'm understanding, you're saying with these high volume things, are all the vehicles going to be compatible with those charging stations? Is that what you're asking?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I know that they've just come about with some protocols for EV charging. That's been one of the big issues with EV charging is, and we've had Tony on here before talking about EV charging, and he said within that industry, there was the debate, are these things going to be essentially extension cords, just plug in and putting AC power into the vehicle and having it all done inside the vehicle, or are they going to be something more than that, a DC to DC kind of charging process? So I think that has been worked out, I believe. I know that there is now an industry standard for charging. I don't know how widely it is adopted, but I would have to believe that these charging stations, in order to be effective, they're going to have to be able to be cross-platform. It's going to have enough smarts to say what is the capacity of that vehicle that I'm connected to, so I don't just fry that engine. I mean, you don't want to. We've had proprietary solutions like the Ford F-150 Lightning has its own charging station, that you plug in at home. But these things are expensive units. They're $50, $80, $100,000, those fast chargers. So I have to believe they're smart enough and they'll follow those protocols. But as Chris had just asked a minute ago, when does bidirectional charging come into play? Because that's kind of the holy grail of all of this. And obviously, if you're talking about fast charging, that's not necessarily the marketplace where you're worried about bidirectional, because you're pulling into a service station, in quotes, and filling up your vehicle when you're on the road. But bidirectional charging in your home or your office, with a level 1 or a level 2 charger, that's definitely sort of the holy grail of EVs, at least from my perspective, where all of those EVs can become essentially a battery backup for your home or your business. And if you've got a bunch of them in a parking lot, it can be a virtual power plant. So that, not yet there. So I think we're getting close, but that has not so much to do with the technology. It has to do with the protocols, the warranties, and the willingness of the automobile manufacturers to participate in that scheme. Because they're in the business of selling vehicles. They're not necessarily in the business of battery backup for your home. I think what they're trying to move towards is proprietary solutions. I don't know if I don't see that as the long-term end goal, where every vehicle has to have its own proprietary charging station in order to get bidirectional capacity. That might be a short-term goal. It's certainly a goal for the automobile manufacturers, but it's not good for the industry. Someone's going to break through that. So, all right. Any other questions on that, or different perspectives?
I have a question.
Sure, Tim.
I might have missed it because I got distracted here, but can you use a Tesla charger to charge your vehicle?
I can't.
You cannot?
I cannot, but the industry has moved to the Tesla plug. So my vehicle's a little older. But this was, I think, just last year, where all of the manufacturers said, okay, we've got these CHAdeMO and we've got the other type plug configurations. Let's all standardize, and we're going to standardize on the Tesla plug. They also have adapters and the like that I guess you could go. But my Prius is not really designed to take those fast chargers. There are a couple more pins that go in. It seems to me it's like a 5-pin configuration or something as opposed to a 3-pin. Mine will work with level 1 and level 2, but not with level 3, because the battery's just not big enough. It doesn't. I mean, I can, with the level 2 charger, it'll charge the whole thing in an hour and a half. So it really doesn't need that high speed. But I assume the newer ones would work with the Tesla chargers.
Okay. Right.
That's my assumption. So, okay. That just goes into that. Driverless vehicles. This is something you hear a lot about, especially from Elon Musk, even though they always call it jazz hands. He's just over there going, woo, look at me, look at me, but there's nothing there. At this moment, it's just kind of Waymo. Waymo is kind of it as far as driverless vehicles. And Waymo, their fleet currently is about 700 cars. They're operating primarily in San Francisco, LA, and Phoenix. The reports that I hear, people love them. They're kind of like Ubers, where you call up, the Waymo shows up. It's no driver in it. You get in, takes you where you're going. I just heard today, in fact, on a podcast I was listening to, they're going to introduce into the Washington, D.C. marketplace. So Waymo has been doing this pretty methodically. As you can see there, the paid rides, they operate about 100,000 weekly rides, completed about 2 million to date. They use very high end. So it's primarily Jaguars, as that the Waymo system is in there. So I'm sure it's pricey, but if you're into that, I'm not upset having a driver in my vehicle. So, I guess I'm not the target audience for this. So we'll see. But driverless vehicles, a lot of people have concerns about it. My glib answer to that is, have you seen how people drive? Driverless couldn't be worse. It's so well, we'll see where that goes. And this one, God's Eye, this is something that was just introduced by BYD. They're offering free driver assistance tech, which is one step away from driverless, for their vehicles that are under $10,000. So for their low-end vehicles now, they're getting essentially hands-free driving introduced into these vehicles right now. And again, all of the reports are that it's every bit as good as the other alternatives. So what's the projected growth? Well, again, when I did the research, this is all crystal ball, but the charts all kind of look like this. There's 33% annualized growth. And it's coming. It's funny. I do a lot of solar assessments for REAP grants. We'll see if I keep doing those, considering the nature of grants in the world of solar at the moment. But a lot of the farmers that I go out and talk to, one of the things I ask them about is, what is your future electrical needs? Do you think you're going to be using more electricity, less electricity in the future, that kind of thing? And I'll usually bring up, are you thinking about getting an electric vehicle in the future? Oftentimes I get an immediate pushback. It's like, I'm not driving no electric vehicle. I don't like them. I don't trust them. And, my response to these guys, I don't have to push electric vehicles, but I will say, I think you're going to be driving an electric vehicle in the future, not because you have to, because you want to. You're going to have the experience of being in an electric vehicle, and you're going to find you like that better than what you've been driving. So don't dismiss it out of hand, give it a try. It's sort of like, I don't like mushrooms, so give them a try. So, all right. So we're looking at this growth, and actually a lot of the market share they're talking about for new vehicles, all the projections land somewhere in this number, that by 2030, which is only, 5 years off in the market of automobiles, the model year, 40 to 50% of all new vehicles sold worldwide are going to be electric or plug-in hybrid. So this is a fairly rapid transition that's going to have pretty dramatic impacts on not only the transportation industry, because as Devin pointed out earlier, these vehicles are not just light vehicles. We're talking about semi trucks. We're talking about, other type of fleet vehicles like, UPS vehicles, all of these delivery vehicles that are out there, all transitioning to electric. So that has environmental impact for sure. But it also, what does that do to the electrical demand on the grid? So this gets to another situation that we're dealing with as a nation. We're already in a position where it takes 5 years to get approval for a utility scale production facility to get connected to the grid. We don't have 5 years. You know, if in 5 years, half of the vehicles that are being sold are electric, and the transportation industry uses as much power, as much energy as buildings do. So we're looking at half of the transportation industry going electric in 5 years, which would basically mean a 50% increase in electrical demand in 5 years. Then put on top of that data centers, artificial intelligence, cryptocurrency, all of these things that are putting inordinate demands on the electrical grid already, and then throw another 50% on top of that in a regulatory system that can't even process paperwork in less than 5 years. What is the solution there? And I think we got a hint of it in the news today earlier, where you start saying, okay, these big companies are going to build their own mini grids. You know, I'm going to put this facility behind the meter because now I can control that. Well, that's fine for Google. It's fine for Amazon. How many of us could afford that kind of investment? So I just feel like in the near term, we're facing an interesting energy crisis, something that's of our own making. We're transitioning our society to be fully electric, but we're not transitioning our electric to deal with the changes in our society. So near term, kind of bad news, elevating our cost of electricity for sure. Long term, I think it's all rainbows and unicorns. You know, we're talking about, we're moving towards this glorious age of you know, renewable energy, which but as my dad, who was an economist, he always said, well, in the long term, we're all dead. So I don't know if that's going to be a big help, you know, when short term is where we live. So we're going to have to deal with that. Anybody have any comments here before we call it a day?
Yeah, I was actually involved in a project in Trinidad where our public transport utility company sent out a tender for EV buses, quite a number of them. Once they arrive in the country, they will be distributed through the various depots. But the electrical infrastructure changes that they had to make with the public utility electrical company, it was enormous. Electrical infrastructure works have to go down. We're not talking about the bus terminus itself. I'm talking within the power company, where even at the substations, going back to the transformers. So when it really requires a huge upgrade in electrical cost as well, when they talk about the transportation sector in terms of the infrastructure to put on.
Do you think Trinidad the electric company there will actually meet the needs of that infrastructure upgrade?
Well, they're doing the upgrade, but what is interesting, there's a cost for that, and they charge that cost to the transportation company have to pay that cost.
Okay. All right. So yeah, there's definitely going to be cost and time. So, but as I said, I guess I'll wrap it up saying, okay, in the short term, I think we're facing some interesting times. In the long term, I think that it's going to be very positive. All right. Well, thank you guys for your attention, and we'll see you guys next week. All right. Take care.